Katy, what an absolute pleasure to have you here. Thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
Standing in at last minute as well. I messaged you only a couple of days ago, so thank you ever so much. It's really appreciated. So I'm really excited to get into this, but first of all, I'd love you just to let everyone know who doesn't know you, which I don't know that'll be that many because you're well known out there, but who doesn't know you, who you are, and what it is that your experience has been.
I'm Katy Holder-vale. I've been in the horse business over 40 years. I've been breeding horses for 40 years. I started actually breeding thoroughbreds, hopefully for eventing. And we also used to do resting race horses as well. And then I went into breeding mostly Hanoverians, some for eventing, but mostly for dressage. So 40 years of breeding horses.
So running a successful stud, it must be, if it's been 40 years.
Yeah, I haven't given up yet. Yeah. I keep trying. Keep trying.
So are you actively breeding at the moment?
No, I am trying to stop breeding. My husband bred a foal this year. And we still have one stallion who is with us, but he's sort of semi-retired now. He's called Samba Hit 3. He was ridden by Gareth Hughes originally. He won at the Nationals at Inter 2. Okay. He's a really fantastic horse. He's 21 now, and we use him for our apprentices to ride, and he's a complete saint. He's about 17 too, but he is a complete saint.
Gentle giant.
Yeah, he's a gentle giant.
Oh, fantastic. So what I'd love to start with is if just we get an idea of your journey, because it's quite something, 40 years of it. So from my understanding, you started at Witcham House Stud in 1983. So you started there. How did that go for you?
So before I was there, I was in Hertfordshire. Okay. And I had a small livery yard, and I was eventing the full time. And the liveries basically paid for the eventing. And I did quite a bit of teaching and schooling people's horses. And then I was getting married, and we needed to have our own place. And it was impossible to find anything in Hertfordshire, so we moved up to Cambridgeshire. Yeah. And where we are now of 40 years. We could buy more land, but we actually bought a barn and sort of some derelict buildings and made that into 21 stables, and the barn was converted into a house. Right. And I've been there ever since. It's sort of like an ongoing maintenance thing, which you have with stables. But it's very nice. It's a nice village we live in, and it's ideal for my horse business. Yeah. Because it's very quiet. We also live in a village, so we can actually hack the horses around the roads, which are really quiet, which is really handy. And we have neighbours and things who we all help each other. And it's a nice community in our village.
Brilliant. So is your main business over the years has been the stud, or would you say it's sort of the liveries and the stud came later?
I think it's been a play it by ear all the way along. Because there's times in the breeding industry when it's very difficult to sell young horses. It was one of the reasons, really, I wanted to breed dressage horses, because you can sell them on their movement as foals. Whereas with eventers, people, it's hard to get them to buy them as foals. Okay. They really want something that's up and ready to be ridden. So, so years that we could sell the youngsters, then we would be breeding if we knew that we had a good market. But when it looked like the market was difficult and we were accumulating too many young horses, then we'd have more liveries. Mostly we would have schooling liveries for people. So things that people are having problems with or needed starting or needed competing, then we'd do more of those. So we would interchange it really, depending on what the market was doing. Because you've got to make enough money to survive.
Yes.
And you've got to be able to pay your staff.
Yes.
But you have to understand where the market is going.
I think that's a really good point just to stick on for a minute, because there's many people out there trying to make businesses like that work today. Many that start and fail, and many who sort of give up in the end because it feels like you can never really get over the hurdle of sort of almost penny pinching all the time. So what is your opinion of the market as it is today, and how can someone start like you did all those years ago today?
I think it's pretty tough. I think there's lots more hurdles out there now. And I think you have to be so aware of social media and how to use social media to your benefit and not to your detriment, or to the whole industry's detriment, I might say. It is a big problem. I think going forward, the good things is there's a huge amount of information out there if you know how to get it. So the internet is full of anything. You can ask any question you like and it will give you lots of information. Whether that's correct information, that's up to you to make a decision. But you can gain so much. In the past, my system was always to network. So I would always talk to people that I knew were successfully breeding, or, they were teaching people and had new ideas about training, or had new trainers coming over. Then I would always network, and that's what we did. I think now you can network very easily and you can get answers to things very easily. I spend a huge amount of my time with people that ring me and say, can I pick your brains? And that's absolutely fine. And I like people to do that. Although I have always said in my life, don't give people advice unless they ask for it, or unless you think they're in danger. Because there's nothing more annoying than people that give you advice when you don't want it.
Yes.
But, I'm always happy if somebody says, can I pick your brains? And then I say, yeah. And then sometimes I'll say, you can, but I have no idea. I can't give you an answer, but I know somebody that can. And I think the biggest problem in the horse industry, I think going forward, will be employment. And especially with the new rules coming in with the government, which is quite frightening to our business.
Yes.
Is that I think next year when you employ somebody, they have full status, which means you cannot have them on trial.
Right.
So in the past, we always had people on 3 months trial.
Yes. Because
you have to be sure that they are going to treat the horses in the way you like the horses treated, that they are going to be punctual and understanding and fit into your team. Whereas now it's not going to be like that. You have to employ these people and you have to work with it. And I think it's quite a problem. Several businesses I know are changing over to taking freelancers.
Right.
So it's more expensive, but in the long run, it probably isn't, because you only pay them for the work they do. So they come in and they do like 5 hours with you. You pay them for 5 hours. They bill you at the end of the week or the end of the month. And that's how you go. But you don't have to pay their tax. You don't have to pay them holiday money. I've employed quite a few people over the years. One particular girl worked for me for 22 years. She had 2 children along the way, so 2 lots of maternity leave, which is very expensive in a small business. And tomorrow we have one coming back who worked for me for 9 years, and she's just on her 2nd lot of maternity leave. So it's not easy, and I can see why a lot of businesses will probably go to a freelance situation.
So we talked about the positives of freelance. Obviously, there's negatives as well because it's hurting the employed industry. So what are the really obvious red flags for just using freelancers? What is the negatives for business on that?
Well, they don't have a commitment to you.
True.
And they don't have a connection with you. And keeping one on the long term is also difficult. So that's got to be borne in mind. But I do know a lot of people will go that way.
Absolutely.
And there's a couple of businesses I know, they've actually decided that they're going to make their business smaller so they can run it themselves and not have to employ people.
No, so it's very interesting because there's been so much talk about these changes, the government, the budget, and and you're echoing it. I couldn't really see many positives for us.
No, I think it's quite tricky. It's really, really tricky.
Do you think that there'll be more uptake of things like apprenticeships, which they're supposedly going to help us with?
I've always done apprenticeships. From when I very first started, we had a thing called the YT scheme, and then it became the YTS, and then we went on to apprenticeships. And I've been a huge supporter, and I've always had an apprentice. And I think it's a great way to get people into the industry, and it's a very good way of on-job training. I've also taught in one of the colleges. I taught in the College of West Anglia for 11 years, so I know how we produce students in that way. But I think an apprenticeship is much better
Okay.
And it makes a more useful person for the industry because they have lots of actual practical experience rather than being told how to do things.
Yeah.
They've actually been doing things, which make a big difference. And the way apprenticeships are now, we do a huge amount of video as we go. So that apprentice will leave me and she's got hours and hours of video. So she goes for an interview somewhere and somebody says, can you poultice a foot? She'll say, here I have 3 videos of me poulticing this foal's foot, that horse's foot. So they've got a huge amount of information that they can give an employer.
That's fantastic.
I think it's a really good tool. Yeah. The biggest problem, this is my big bugbear with apprenticeships, is that the poor student has to have maths and English.
Okay.
And that is a big problem because we have lots of students who are very practical people, but are not academic. They're never going to need English. They're never going to need maths. They are really super people working in your business. They don't need that. But it can exclude some of those people from starting an apprenticeship because they don't have that.
No, very good point. So where would those people go? I guess they would seek employment just casually, would they, do you think?
Possibly. Some of the training agencies like Keats and Haddon, they actually offer help for those people.
Right.
So they will try and get them through their maths and their English, which is quite difficult, but it's a strain on the student because they are having to do that alongside their apprenticeship.
Right.
So it eats into some of their training time, which is a real shame.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for our industry, we don't need it. No. We really don't.
No, we don't. We don't. Okay. And so as things have progressed through your career, you're now the leader of Hanoverian Society, is that right?
In England.
In England, okay.
Yeah.
So and you've been doing that how long? Quite a while, isn't it?
Well,
I shouldn't ask that question.
I've been at least 25 years on the committee.
Wow.
I've been probably, I think, 15 years as the chairman. I keep trying to hand on the baton, but it is not that simple. But we've come a long way in the history that I've been there because it was a small society to begin with.
Yes.
And we're a daughter society of the German society, and we basically have to run under their rules. And they used to be very straight and strict with their rules, but they've now loosened up a lot of things, which makes life a lot easier. And in the Hanoverian Society, Brexit was a big help to us.
Yes,
you never hear this very often.
I was about to ask you that.
Yeah, well, it was because they excluded all the foreign societies that were issuing passports to horses born in England. So we had the Westphalians and the Oldenburgs and Holsteiners. They would come and they would issue paperwork for those horses. But with Brexit, DEFRA brought in a rule that we couldn't have any foreign stud books issuing passports for horses that are born in England.
Okay.
But they then said to us, DEFRA said to us, are you able to take these horses into your stud book? And yes, we are. And there's also the Anglo-European Society. They can also take those horses into their stud book as well. So as far as DEFRA was concerned, they didn't want any of the foreign stud books issuing passports.
Yeah.
So this then meant that we got a lot of new mares coming to us and more foals coming to us, which was a plus for our society. And it's been a really good thing, and we've seen some great bloodlines, and we've got some super people that come to us over the years.
Yeah. Well, and that sort of leads on to the fact that you now hold an annual show. I don't know if that happened before, but I know you've done it the past couple of years. Has that really helped with the acceleration of that?
Well, we've had an annual show for the last 25 years.
Oh, okay. I'm a little bit new into it.
Yes, no problem. And we decide sort of different things that we're going to do. Last year, we did a big foal tour, which meant we brought a German judge over and toured them round England and went to different places to do foal shows. Down in Devon, we have a big foal show. There's 70 foals there. They're like clockwork, and we get through 70 foals in a day. It's pretty good going. It's nearly as bad as judging in Germany, I might say. So we did that, and we felt that did quite well, but we then found that the annual show was not well supported because people had come to the regional things.
Yeah.
Yeah. They then felt, oh, I'm not coming out again. And of course, we have the futurity as well. So some people will come out to the futurity and then not do the annual show.
Yes.
So, it sort of swings and roundabouts what they do. So this year we had a big memorial show for Ted Green, who was originally our president and had been chairman before me. And we decided we'd do a big gala dinner. It's a little bit complicated when you run a society, because our society is a non-profit making, which means that we mustn't accumulate too much money of our members' money. So we had a long discussion and decided that we would run the gala show at a loss, and we would subsidise members having a free dinner.
Okay.
So dinner tickets were £65, but if you were a fully paid up member for the year, which you need to be if you're going to register a foal, you had a free ticket to the dinner.
Wow.
Which was very popular.
Yes, I'm sure. Well, I was there. It was busy enough.
Yeah, it was busy enough.
Yes, yeah.
So if you remember, it makes a really big difference.
Fantastic.
So we felt, we were able to give something back. We also gave free entries for mares that came with a foal. They got a free entry for the mare shows.
Okay.
Which was a good idea as well, because it meant we got more mares in the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
That's what you
really
wanted.
good.
The idea of this show was to really bring more people in, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because you also did a gelding section, didn't you?
We did a gelding class.
Yeah.
We've been asked, we do, in our mare performance test, you can actually bring a gelding in. And we have had geldings in the past, which is really quite fun. And people enjoy doing it. But we had been asked for a gelding class, and we had 4 entries, which we thought was pretty good for first go. I mean, originally we had 8 or something, but then they all fall behind by the wayside. And we had really good standard, which was nice. And lots of people came and said, oh, that's really fun. We'll do that next year. So I think we were all a bit reeling after the show, because it's quite hard work to produce something like that. And everybody's saying, what are the dates for next year? What are you going to do?
Give me 5 minutes.
Let's get over this.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, but it was a really good show, and no other societies do that these days.
No.
So I think it's a really quite fun thing.
Absolutely.
And we will advertise it more and promote it more.
Yeah. I mean, have you got the dates? Do you know when they are?
Not off the top of my head.
So I'll put it on here.
It'll be on the end of August, but it has to be like the week before the Dressage Nationals.
Of course.
So it gets quite complicated.
Yes, you've got to fit it in around all the other big dates that we've got
in the
dressage world.
And we were looking at different places that we could possibly have it, because we try not to just be in one place.
Got you.
Because we try and attract some of our breeders from other areas. But our big problem is we need large enough stables for mares and foals.
Yes.
And we needed 62 stables this year. So that's quite difficult to find a place that you can accommodate that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's nice that you do try and spread, go to different venues, not only for the competitors and different draw of people, but also for the venues, because it's clear to see, I think it was earlier last month, Hickstead announced they weren't going to be running the dressage anymore. So it's nice that you are looking at other venues as well for that reason. In fact, whilst I've mentioned that, as somebody that's been in the industry for quite some time, because I brought this up on a previous podcast, what is your thoughts on how we can support those venues to stop people like Hickstead saying it's not cost effective anymore?
We're living in difficult times.
It is challenging.
This is the problem. And I think people are really nervous, with a change of government, and then we've got a whole load of new laws coming in.
Yeah. And
I think also when we had Brexit, we sucked up a huge amount of the European law. And I think that's quite hard to live with. And I think from the horse point of view, we're going to be burdened with quite a bit of European law. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that.
Yeah.
I think the problem is people have tightened their belts. So every show we go to, there are less competitors. And you can understand that. People have been more selective. I think also from the people I know, they seem to be spending a little bit more money on the training and doing less shows, which in my opinion is a better way to go. But then that's hard on the venues. It's just so expensive for venues to, run these shows. And competitors want shows on Saturdays and Sundays. Well, the venues need the shows that make money. So you'll get the jumping shows on those days, because that's where they get enough competitors. Our dressage competitors, you have to be prepared to go out on a Tuesday or a Friday night or whatever, you're going to have to fit in to what they can manage.
Yes.
I think it's going to be like this for a while. I think people are being super careful. It's the same with selling horses at the moment. People are super careful about, what they're doing and what they're spending.
I think that's a very valid point, in that I'm also seeing it in the horse transport side of things. More and more, I'm needing to spend time making, shared trips to cut costs for people. I'm not just getting people call me, I need to go here and there. This is the price. Oh, that's fine. It's not like that at all anymore. The customers are still there, but they're looking for how they can shave off a little bit all the time now. And I think I can't help but feel it's always been that way in the stud industry. It's always been quite hard. Obviously, some people have done really well at it, but as a general smaller business, I think it's always been that way, but it's definitely feeling harder now.
I think people are just being super careful.
Yeah.
And I think we've got to be, really, haven't we? Everything, the cost has gone up.
Absolutely. Even, like you say, everyone's going to freelance employees, but those that aren't and have got more than 4 employees, the national insurance contributions have all gone up as well.
It's huge.
It's a huge amount.
Yeah.
Huge amount. So,
and where does that money come from?
Yeah.
It comes from trying to be economic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Cutting in other areas.
I mean, that is the way you run a horse business, is you have to always be as economic as you can possibly be. I wrote myself a few notes before I came, and I said, you do have to really look after the money, but you mustn't look cheap.
Yes.
It's easy to look cheap or be cheap, but you have to really look after your pennies and don't waste money. You also have to look after your staff big time, because you need them to be loyal and stay with you. But you have to give them, and you have to understand their lives, because, people get married, they have kids, their kids are sick, they need time off, they can't work the hours that you would like them to work, but you have to basically work around that and make it all fit together.
So I think it's very well and good saying we need to look after our pennies, but we still got to look after the staff and look after the horses. So where would you suggest that people can look after their pennies more?
I think it's in the way you do things.
Okay.
I mean, we do some strange things that we've done over many years that save us a lot of money. So we collect bags of shavings from joiners direct. Okay. Because it's much cheaper than buying baled shavings. But over the years, I've probably done it from about 20 different places. And I'm lucky that I've got one which is like 10 minutes up the road now. And they supply just enough for what I need, so that works quite well. I still have to buy some baled shavings, but it is a huge cost saving. The other thing we do as well is we've always done deep litter bedding. It's not fashionable these days. People like to have lots of rubber matting and a tiny little square of beautiful looking shavings. But it's not very comfortable for a horse. And in my feelings, I don't like horses stood for hours on hard rubber mats. But that's my personal opinion. I like a horse to be stood on something that's similar to what they would be stood if they're out in the field. Yes. So grass that has a bit of spring in it. So we have deep litter beds. That doesn't mean that they've got 2 foot of soggy bed underneath them. No. But it means that we keep the wet to a minimum. But it also keeps the amount of mucking out you do to a minimum. So we don't muck out twice a day. We basically take out the poo, and then we remove some of the wet, but you can do a stable pretty easily in 10 minutes.
Wow.
And then that means you employ less people. You also produce less muck, so you don't have to empty your trailer quite so often. So it's quite a big saving over a lot of time and less work for your staff. Sometimes we do have to dig out the whole bed. We just decide that it's time to dig out the whole bed. Yeah. And then sometimes you find you've got a really wet horse and you just get down so you don't have very much in there. So you do have to, look at what you're doing, but it is a much more economic way, and it does save a lot of money and it saves a lot on your staff time.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's almost like you've reviewed like the ecosystem, I guess, and you're sort of looking at the most efficient way to do it. So that's great advice for anyone that's listening that wants to start.
I mean, it's not so attractive to people because it doesn't look as nice. We tend to, if you have a buyer coming to see a horse, then we'll put some new shavings on the top So the bed looks quite attractive.
Yes.
But you go to lots of places and they'll have a big expanse of rubber matting at the front of the stable and then a little bit of immaculate shavings at the back. And that's how they like to do it. But we've had liveries over many years and they're all quite happy that the way we do it.
Yeah.
And that works for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
We also have automatic waterers.
Okay.
Which saves a huge amount of money.
Yes.
And time and your staff's backs as well. We always appreciate them greatly when we have a huge freeze in the winter, because then when they freeze, we then have to bring the water out of the house in buckets.
Yeah.
And then everybody realises how important it is to have automatic waterers.
Yeah. Don't you get those burst pipes though, and you have stables flooded because of the drinkers?
Well, I'm very lucky that I have a son who's 23 and he's he's an electrician, but he's also will do anything.
Yeah.
So we have completely insulated all our pipes.
Oh, fantastic.
So we have insulation and then we have plastic gutters over the top of them so the horses can't eat the insulation.
There we go.
It's just amazing. But that's taken me 40 years to get to this.
Yeah, it's amazing.
But it's made a huge difference.
Yeah.
A really big difference. Because we haven't had to keep redoing the insulation and keeping an eye on it. And in 40 years of being there, I mean, we've always had insulation on the pipes, but I've only probably had 3 burst pipes.
Wow.
So, but you see, if you keep the pipes in the stables, the horse's heat also helps.
Yes.
So it helps to actually keep the ambient temperature of the right level.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you shouldn't get... Where we have had burst pipes is often where it's going across a doorway, above a doorway, and you get a bit of draft that comes through, but very rare actually in the stable.
Mm-hmm. Oh, brilliant.
But your waterers need to be very robust because horses are very dangerous and they pull things off the walls very easily.
Yeah, and rub the bottoms on things.
Yes. Yeah, you literally have to bolt them through the wall.
Yes. Yeah, and you need to have the right strength and, decent ones. I've seen plenty of...
Oh, the plastic ones are ridiculous.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, so just going to turn to horse welfare. We've discussed about it before the podcast started, and it's a big topic, and you've been working on some things directly related to it. So I'd love to get your opinion on what's going on in the industry in terms of horse welfare. How can we be better as an industry? What are the pitfalls and what are you working on?
I think this has all been triggered by social license to operate.
Mm-hmm.
They're renaming it now because they don't like license. They think we shouldn't be given a license to keep horses.
Right.
Which we're not.
No.
Yeah, they're talking about rewording that.
Okay.
But I think because of that, it's very important that the public has a good view of what we do with horses.
Mm-hmm.
And going forward, we need to tell people the good things we do with horses, not put all over social media the bad things that people do with horses.
Yes.
It's very important we protect our sport and we promote the good things we do. The British Equestrian Federation have just done a big, I'm just trying to think what the title of it is, but it's basically how to bring horses up in a kind and considerate way. I'm on one of the boards of the World Breeding Federation for Sports Horses, and we've just done, in the process of finishing a 18-month project on best breeding practice.
Mm-hmm.
This is along with Hanoverian University, and we've had 2 professors helping us there, and they've been amazing. We had a big a general assembly in Portugal recently, and they did their presentation of where they've got to. And we're hoping to finalise it at the end of December, and it will be published on the website in the spring. And it will basically have 10 principles of good breeding practice. As I said to you before, it's not we're telling everybody this is what you must do.
No.
We're just saying this is all the science behind these statements, and all the science will be there for people to reference if they want to. But the basic 10 principles will be there. And it's very important that the general public understands how we help horses, what we're doing to make horses have a good and happy life. It also talks about end of life as well, and being responsible horse owners, that, horses are treated in the right way when they're older as well.
Yes.
I think the thoroughbred industry have also done a welfare project, haven't they?
Yes, yeah, I think they have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's essential. We've got to be telling the world the good things we do.
Absolutely, because as we all know, especially in this industry, as soon as there's anything that's less than good, it's everywhere. And actually, we do way more good than we do anything else. The same with any industry. There's always going to be a number of people or an organisation which isn't acting in quite the right way, but everybody else is. But that one person or that one organisation taints everything for everybody. So I love that you've done that. You've done the 10 points, and I think that'll be really useful for studs. Does it go into detail about generally riding horses, or is it specifically for studs?
Well, the World Breeding Federation, we're breeding sports horses intended for the Olympic disciplines. So it's mostly breeders of warm blood horses over the whole world. And this project, they spoke to people all over the world about what they consider as best breeding practice and what goes on in their world. It's very interesting, and I think it'll be a very positive thing going forward.
I feel like anyone that's listening that might have a stud or be going into it might think, oh no, this is going to be a whole load of more expense. It's going to be a big hassle for them. What advice would you give them?
As in the welfare project, or what it might suggest?
Well, what it might suggest, you've got these 10 principles which, you're not telling them to do it, but you're giving them the best practice. And the most important thing you said is it's scientific based, which is really important. But there will be somebody or studs generally going, oh, now there's another 10 things we've got to do. We can't afford to do it how we are doing it. So what would you say to that?
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from. A lot of them are things they are doing anyway.
Okay.
A lot of it is the science to prove a lot of the things we've done over many years. And the science is very interesting. When we did the webinar about the weaning project, that was very interesting to see the stress levels that the foals exhibited in the different methods that were used. And I think we will say this is best breeding practice, but you as a stud may still only be able to do it in a different way. But I think education is so important, and we all need education. And in the horse world, we're getting it all the time. Every single day,
yes.
You're learning something new. And I think if there's science there as well, I think it's fascinating. I mean, over the years, we used to breed a lot of foals. And over the last few years, we've made it less. So we then got to the stage where we had 2 foals. And it was, what do we do when we come to wean them? And in fact, we went back to the original way that we used to do it when we had a very big herd, was just take away 1 mare at a time. But you need to have the foals have to be in that herd for quite a long time. So they've made the herd. And that was the information that was interesting and made me more aware. It was something we did, because we put our mares and foals out with some of our empty mares and some of our retired mares. So we would always have quite a big herd. And then it's always fascinating to see how the foals work in. We've got a filly foal this year, and she is best friends with her auntie. Mm-hmm. So her mother weaned her anyway. So we took her mother away. She never noticed her mother going away at all.
Right.
But if we move her auntie, she has to come with her auntie.
Okay.
So she's just attached to her.
Yes.
But she hasn't had any stress. It hasn't worried her at all. And they're saying a lot of the separation anxiety that some horses suffer is probably attributed to bad weaning practice.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So really, these 10 things, they're not, you've got to buy this, have this, and do that. It's actually, this is how we have scientifically tested the best way to reduce stress, to, look after your mare, to do this with the foal. That's basically what you've done.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And a lot of it, those studs will be doing anyway.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm old and have been doing it for years, but I learned a lot. It's been fascinating to actually look at the science of it.
Yes.
And because they've looked at 3,000 papers, and then they've sort of whittled it down to what was relevant to what they needed. And then the research from all over the world is amazing.
Oh, that's amazing. So I think And again, this whole paper and this whole research project is also to demonstrate to the wider world as well that, hey, look, this is what we are doing, and then we can demonstrate, and this is why we do it this way. Is that part of the reason as well?
Very much so. Yeah. And they talk about the horse's mental state, which is very modern. This is what we have to do. In the past, we'd say, well, they've just got to go past this thing that they're terrified of. We're just going to make them go past.
Yes.
But now we're actually thinking about how they think about it and why they think about it.
I think that almost correlates in a way with humans, because we've very much been of the opinion, years ago that, there's no such thing as a mental health issue. Not necessarily quite that drastic, but now we're looking at humans and saying, well, this is why we're getting these problems. And so we're also doing that with horses. I think that's really important. So that sort of brings me on to a topic of welfare and training. Now, as somebody who's been in the industry for a long time, you've done your stud, and clearly you're working still a lot within studs and that area of business. But how do we now move forward and make sure that we're doing the correct training practices, sort of another level on top of the breeding? How do we judge that?
Yes, it's a thorny subject. I think really because of what's gone on in social media. And I think it's a bit unfortunate. And I think in the equestrian world, we need to think about what we do. There's nothing worse is looking on Facebook and somebody says, oh, I hate my horse today. It was this, that, and the other, and blah, 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 and it did this, and I'm going to give up, and blah. You should never put any of that on Facebook.
No.
Facebook is for putting the good things about your horses. It's not about the bad things. I think training-wise, I've always think that you've got to think about the horse's feelings and the logic of it. We've always said, if a horse doesn't want to do something, is it because it doesn't understand? Is it because it's uncomfortable? Is it because it really just doesn't feel like it today? And you, as a horse person and trainer, you have to understand what those answers that horse is giving you. I think probably in the last 20 years, I've really learned to look at horses' facial expressions. We've done a lot of backing horses in the past, and we always say that when a horse starts to mouth, that when they're working on the lunge, that's often when they are submissive and understanding and working with you. But there's a huge amount of other things that they show you. And over the years, we've learned to look at those because we need to survive. So we're not going to get on them when they're saying, no, I really don't want to do this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we have to understand, understand the reasons for this. And as a good trainer, you have to have the empathy with your horse. The other thing you have to understand is not all riders get on with all horses. And often you will find you've just got the bad mix. It's fine if you have other people working for you and you can swap them around, but you do have to understand that some horses will love some people and some horses won't love some people. We have a particularly delicate horse who's very choosy about who she's friends with. But we also have a trainer who helps us a bit. And every single horse loves her.
Okay.
I've never seen a horse that doesn't love her. But she loves them too.
Yes.
And I think because she radiates that, and even when she's told she's getting a horse that rears and falls over backwards all the time, and she's getting that one to sort out, she goes into it with love and affection, and those horses respond to her.
Yeah.
And that is a very important thing that we have to be aware of in our business. The horses basically do their very best to try and do the right thing for you. You just have to understand how to go about it in the right way.
Absolutely. I suppose you can liken that a little bit to humans. Some of us will get on and some of us won't. Not that we necessarily cuss at each other down the street, but naturally we have different energies. And then I would say that I've spent a bit more time in the racing industry, which has got its own nuances. But I would say they are, or particularly the trainers I have worked with, are much more aware of which horse gets on better with which person. And I was totally blown away by that. In a sense, I understand that happens, but I didn't think, particularly in the racing industry, perhaps my bias, that whether they would actually care about that, and it would be a case of just get on with it. But they really are aware of that. So I think that
they've in the last 10 years they've come a long way, haven't they? The trainers are much more aware of the psyche of their animals.
Yes,
it's fascinating when you watch them.
Absolutely. I mean, I've only worked with some small trainers, so I don't know what happens with everybody. So I'm talking for a very small number of people, but it definitely is something they're aware of. So how do we go about then with welfare now demonstrating to the wider world? Because it's all well and good we only put positive stuff on social media, because that in an ideal world is what would happen, but it's not always going to happen. And I'm sure all the bad bits get picked up on tenfold what the good bits do. But as equestrians, how can we really go out there and make a difference to how we're being perceived from people who actually don't know what's going on or understand it?
Yes, I think we have to be very quick to say what the positives are. Mm-hmm. I think this is why there's all these welfare projects going on at the moment. And I think it's important, that we really do say that we're doing the right things for horses. I mean, there's been talk about people not being allowed to keep horses or not being allowed to ride horses. And I think in Australia, they've stopped them doing jump racing with horses.
Right.
Which is quite frightening. They would stop greyhound racing as well. But that's because of public opinion.
Yes.
And that's what we've got to be so aware of. So we just have to make sure that we tell the world that we are looking after our horses. I'm not going to say names, but there was a big issue last year with a particular stud and producer of horses. And they've obviously had somebody professional come in and say, now you need to tidy up your act. And then they have on Instagram and also on Facebook, one of those little feeds, they put all the lovely things they do with their horses. So they do the, caring for them and brushing them and scratching them and all sorts of things like that and grazing them in hand. And they're really making a big effort to show all the good things that they are doing. And I think that is a very professional and sensible way forward. And I think we really need to think of that. We had a young girl come and try a horse at the weekend, and her dad was saying to me, oh dear, this is going to cost me so much money. And, and I said, here you are on a Saturday afternoon and it's sunny and lovely and your daughter's riding a horse and she's having a lovely time. Would you rather she was sat at home in her bedroom sitting on a computer for 5 hours? Would that be better? And he said, no. He said, you're quite right. I'm really grateful. I said, this is going to cost you a lot of money, but it's a very healthy thing and it's very good for young people's minds.
I don't think people look at that enough.
No.
It's all very well and good and quick to jump on expenses, responsibility, but no one says, but actually at least they're not sat on their tablet, phone or device all day.
Yeah.
I really think that's undervalued in the industry, actually.
Yeah, she came in from riding this horse and she wanted to untack it and brush it and cuddle it. And, that was really, really nice. She's obviously begun to really enjoy horses.
Yeah, absolutely. So it takes me back to when I started riding. I was 15 when I started riding. But I was very much the same. I was always on the go, and then just suddenly to be able to care for this animal, the responsibility, then the progress over the years, helping people with their horses, and then the dressage. And unfortunately, I went to university. Not unfortunately, great experience, but I did lose my way a bit with the horses, and I'm just getting started again. But that is a big thing, getting outside, doing something.
It is so good for everybody. It is.
Absolutely.
Not so nice when it's raining and snowy.
And icy. And
yeah. We ride through our village and people say to us, oh, it must be so nice doing your job. I said, yeah, when you're snugged up in your bed and we're riding past in the pouring rain, it's not quite so nice. But
No, but we're forever grateful for it in the end.
Yeah.
And it's the companionship you have with the horse as well, isn't it?
Yes, and the relationship you develop with the horse.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you mentioned Flamingold earlier, and he came into my life when I was going through a difficult time. And I'd known him since he was a foal, actually. And he was going through a difficult time for him. And basically, we rescued him out of Germany because it's a long story, but anyway, he came to us when he was 16 and in a very poor condition. And he was a tremendous character. A lot of stallions are, they are like that, but he was a tremendous character. And the development of him as a person, well, as a part of our team, he had a great relationship with everybody in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And the girls always used to laugh because he would bang his door only if he heard my voice.
Right.
So if I wasn't around, nothing. But the minute he heard my voice, he'd go, right, she's here. She's got to come and talk to me now. I go, oh dear. But a tremendous character, really was.
And that's what people don't see. We're just talking about social media. We're just talking about all of these negative things, but they don't see that connection you get with your animals. I know many horses over the years that are silent, and then they hear your car pull up, and it's only a certain type of engine noise because if someone else's car pull up, they don't do it. And it's just, there is so much magic in there that is totally neglected because people and outside the world focus on the negatives.
And it's amazing to make a great partnership with a horse.
Yeah.
And they do it because they're having fun with you. They think it's great.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it does come down to reading your horse and knowing what's going on with them as well.
Yeah.
Definitely. So we're getting towards the end of the session. So thank you very much. I just wanted to ask if you could summarize for somebody out there who's just getting started, back when you started at Witcham Farm,
many years ago.
Many years ago, let's not say anything else. Today's world is much more challenging. We've touched on it already. There's a whole host of issues, welfare issues. Why should they get involved in the business, and what should they do to make it a success from the outset?
Okay, so when I started, the important thing was to make connections. I'd moved to a different area, so I then had to connect in that area. So I helped out at local shows. I joined the committee of the riding club and the pony club and went and built jumps and did things like that and made connections to my locals. And then that brings you business in the long run. If you become a judge, that also helps. Saying that none of these things make you any money, but they do make you connections and in the long run brings you business. But it's a bit of a long haul. These days, there are other ways of going about it. I think everybody says make a brand. It's very important to make a brand. And I think it's very important that you get your name out there and people understand what you can deliver. Over the years, we've always competed our stallions a lot so that they are seen out and about, and they've always got business from that way. I think a warm blood stud is really difficult these days because you're up against the continental stallions. When it's easy for them, you can get chilled semen from them very easily. When I started with a warm blood stallion, we used to get 40 mares a season, and that was good business. And then when everybody else can get all the fashionable stallions from abroad, it changed the business dramatically. But because we were still competing our stallions a lot, we still got quite a bit of business. We had to put our prices up a bit because we needed to survive.
Yes.
And then also we'd bring on the young ones and be able to sell them on.
Yeah.
So they made money. But it takes time and money. As we said earlier, you've got to keep a real handle on the costs. And as I said before, you need to do things as cheaply as you can, but without looking cheap.
Yes.
Yeah, that's important. With hindsight, I have never liked to have credit.
Okay.
Only because it just doesn't work in my brain. But I think it's very stupid. I think actually you should get credit if you can to get you started and get things looking good. So you look like you're a good operation. But you've got to budget very, very carefully so you know what's involved. Also, when you start a horse business, it's all down to you. So when somebody's off sick, that means you're doing their work.
Absolutely.
As well as your work. And you have to be aware of that. And that's how it will always be if you run a horse business.
Yeah.
And sometimes, they've all got the flu. So hopefully you had it before and you're better now, so you can carry on and do the work. Yeah, so budget, look after your staff. Oh, the other thing I didn't say at all is insurance is very important.
Okay.
I know a lot of horse businesses that run without insurance, which is a really crazy thing to do. Okay, over these many years, I've spent a huge amount of money, and I've probably had one claim in 40 years, and only a very minor one about a roof. But you just can't take the risk of something happening. You know, I know somebody who, in her business, they had an accident and one of the staff was killed. Yeah, which was a terrible thing, but at least they had some insurance. So
yes.
That was something.
Yeah, and make sure you got the right insurance. I do hear people tell me, I've got insurance. I'm like, well, what is it? And then you actually dive in and it's not really what they needed.
No, because they haven't had the right advice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you know, so if you were going to give advice, what insurance should someone need?
Well, obviously, if you employ people, you've got to have employers. And then you've also got to have liability insurance as well. Because any of your horses could get out and go anywhere, or you're out on the road and they're going to jump on somebody's car or whatever. So you've got to have really good insurance.
Yeah.
But it's a painful expense every year. And every year I think, here we go again. But it's something you really do have to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing I'm going to say is, this is something I did a bit at the beginning, is insured myself from a health point of view.
Yes.
Because when you're damaged, you can't work, and your business runs because of you being able to work.
Mm-hmm.
So you do need some insurance. I did a bit at the beginning, and then it was so expensive, I didn't. And then fortunately I married somebody who had insurance with his business. So that then helped.
Yes.
And now I've just had a new knee, so, you know, it's really good.
You're feeling much better, aren't you?
Yeah, much better. Yeah, it made a really big difference.
Yeah, and you're hopefully going to end up on a horse again one day.
Hopefully, yes.
Would you still be doing dressage or
Yeah.
sort of just casual hacking?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah, well, we'll see.
Yeah.
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 I was never a great rider, but I think I'll be really annoyed if I'm a really bad rider. And it takes a lot of work, riding.
Yes.
Yeah, you have to keep at it.
And you're telling someone who's had a few years of intermittent riding, trying to get back into competing next year. It's
a tall task.
Yeah.
It is.
Mm.
And I think as a rider, the biggest problem is you have to be aware that the problems are all your own. They're not the horse's problems. They're all your problems of communicating, understanding, feeling the horse.
I like that.
Most people blame the horse.
Yeah, they do. You're so right. Well,
unfortunately, it's the rider.
Yeah, and I've had this exact conversation with, she won't mind me mentioning her name, Carolyn Watson, you might have know of her, because I'm riding at her stud, and she says that quite a lot. She says it's not the horse, it's the rider. And it gets forgotten about, and that's when frustrations come out. But actually, you always need to descend to yourself and go, what am I doing or not doing?
Yeah.
Or what does the horse not understand, and where do we need to go back a step? Very good point. Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for joining me today. It was last minute, so it's really, really appreciated. Where can people find out more about you?
Well, I do have a very out-of-date website.
Okay.
I have a Facebook page and also an Instagram. Yeah.
But you're most actively at things like the Hanoverian
so you'll find me on the Hanoverian Society and also the World Breeding Federation.
Yeah, if anyone wants to get in touch with you or anything. Fantastic. All right, well, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.